Hello there, I'm Matt Brooker, and this is the first of three special videos for 2000 AD Covers Uncovered. So, 2000 AD covers always start with a brief from the editor, Matt Smith. I really love working with Matt because he gives you a really clear direction, but on the other hand, he leaves the interpretation of that and all the detail down to you. It's a great combination, and it's probably no coincidence that the best received covers I've ever done were ones that were commissioned by him. This brief was quite challenging because it's a battle scene, and battle scenes are chaotic with lots of action and lots of characters. But at the same time, you do need a fairly strong, simple composition so that the cover will stand out when the magazine's on the shelf. And so here you can see in my sketchbook, I've done lots and lots of very simple little roughs, just really using simple shapes to map out strong compositions. At this stage, I'm not thinking about detail at all. I'm just thinking about the broad shapes of the composition. And because these drawings are so simple, I can go through lots of them very quickly and easily to find the right one. For 2000 AD covers, I always try and come up with three separate designs. I send these to Matt Smith in the form of roughs, which are clear enough for him to see the design without me having to spend a lot of time on the drawing. And in the case of these battle scene designs, I was thinking in terms of lines of force. So here you have Black Bob striking downwards, and all the lines of force work into the point of impact. Here he's swinging his club around, and all the main elements line up along a curve through the centre of the picture. And on this final one, you can see that everything lines up on a strong diagonal from bottom left to top right. And in the end, Matt chose the second rough, so from here we're ready to go on to the penciling. So here's the rough that I submitted to Matt Smith. For the penciling, the first thing we want to do is just reduce the opacity. And all I've done here is selected the layer and then turned the opacity slider down to about 50%. And you can see here in a second that because the blue is now lighter, when I scribble over it with the grey penciling lines, that shows up better. And I still call it penciling, even though it's all digital. It may seem odd to have so many stages to the drawing, but strangely it actually helps me to work more quickly. Each step lets me think about a different thing, from gross structure and composition through to fine detail. In the case of the Stickleback technique, this penciling is the last stage that I've really got to try and refine the drawing. And at this stage, we're just going to speed this little section up to get through it. I really wish I could draw this quickly. It's important to back up every now and again and actually look at what you're doing in the context of the overall drawing. Also, of course, I can switch layers off and actually just see what the pencil drawing looks like. So I've spotted here that Stickleback's nose, mouth and chin aren't really lining up with his brows terribly well, so I'm just going to correct that. I'm going to make a lasso selection around the area I want to change and then just drag it all across until it's in the position I want. I'm using Manga Studio to do this, but in fact any imaging program, Photoshop, Illustrator, whichever one you like, all of them will allow you to make these sort of changes, and it's one of the great advantages of working digitally. Back when I was working on paper, I'd often do drawings that I was really pleased with, but there'd just be one part that wasn't quite right. And of course, all I could do was to rub it out and try and redraw it, and I'd just never quite recapture what I'd done the first time. And so if we move forward now, this is the finished penciling for the whole cover. So if I take a second to just hide the rough pencils, this is actually what I did at this stage. This is the penciling. This is what I'll be using to define the blocks of colour for the next stage. So let's move on and have a look at that. Because of the way that Stickleback is done, there isn't any kind of inking stage. What I'm going to do is make blocks of colour on layers underneath the penciling, and those blocks of colour will be used as masks to constrain the texture fills and painting that come afterwards. So the first thing I'm going to do is fill in the background layer with green. You can see that happening there. And we'll start by working on Stickleback's head. So let's zoom into that. Good. Get that centered. I've found the way to get good sharp edges on the blocks of color is to use the lasso tool with anti-aliasing switched off, and then to fill it afterwards with color using Edit Fill. In Photoshop and Manga Studio 3 and 4, you can set up the fill operation as an action, so all you have to do once you've made your selection is tap a function key and the area will fill with color. Manga Studio 5 has a rather neat lasso tool that will automatically fill with color when you complete the selection, but rather typically I didn't find out about this until I'd finished this job. Working like this, it's usually easier to go from background to foreground because each selection you make covers the ones below. But for some weird reason, I've decided to work on the hat this time. So do as I say, but not as I do. You'll have got the idea how this works by now, so I'll speed the rest of this up. I think you can see from this the way that working from the background through to the foreground does make sense. And the brim of the hat is sort of the capstone that finishes it all off there. So now that you can see how that works, let's have a look at the whole finished image. The last part of this stage is to set it up for the texturing, and to do that I show the pencil layer and also the shading from the roughs, and I set the layer with the roughs to multiply so that the shading becomes transparent. And from here we're ready to start adding the textures, and you'll see that in the next. So on the next video I'll be showing you how I add the various texture effects to the blocks of colour, and then we'll start getting something that begins to look like a finished Stickleback page. So thanks for watching. I'm Matt Brooker Trading as Disraeli, and this has been a special video for 2000 AD Covers Uncovered.